There are phrases that may seem innocent, even sweet, at first glance. But behind these words can lie manipulative intentions, a lack of emotional responsibility, and a dangerous resistance to personal growth. And when a woman ignores these signs, she risks entering a relationship that drains her energy, clouds her judgment, and disconnects her from her inner strength. Carl Jung, the renowned Swiss psychologist, spoke of the shadow unconscious, a deep part of the psyche where we bury traits we deny in ourselves and often project onto others. In relationships, this is often where toxic patterns take root. That's why it's so important to recognize the words that reveal such behavior early on to prevent long-term harm. In this video, I'll show you 5 phrases that, if you hear them from a man, should raise a red flag. Because this isn't just about avoiding conflict that would be superficial. It's about understanding that sometimes, beneath a seemingly normal conversation, there's a psychological game being played, one that could cost you your emotional peace and self-control. Seneca once said, "It's not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it. And all too often, we waste it on people who don't deserve it." So be very attentive, because each of these phrases carries a deeper and more dangerous subtext. Ignoring them can lead you into draining relationships where you lose your focus, your self-worth, and most importantly, your connection to yourself. And believe me, no self-respecting woman who has worked hard for her peace and discipline should tolerate such dynamics. Stay with me until the end, because not only will I help you identify these phrases, I'll show you how to respond to them with strength, emotional intelligence, and unwavering composure. Let's begin. First, you should accept me as I am. At first glance, this might sound like a statement of authenticity, even vulnerability. But be careful. When a man uses this phrase to justify harmful behavior, it becomes one of the most common and dangerous red flags. Carl Jung taught us that self-knowledge is the beginning of all wisdom. But he also made it clear, true growth begins when we stop making excuses and start integrating our shadows. When someone hides behind, "This is just who I am," to avoid change, you're not dealing with an authentic person, you're dealing with someone who refuses to grow. This phrase typically appears after you've already noticed troubling behavior, emotional manipulation, avoidance of responsibility, or even passive-aggressive actions. And the worst part is, when you try to address it, he plays the victim or accuses you of trying to change him. But here's the truth. Accepting someone does not mean tolerating the unacceptable. True authenticity is not about staying the same, it's about having the courage to grow. As the Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius said, "The perfection of character is to live each day as if it were your last, without laziness, without pretense." A conscious woman, committed to her own growth, should not carry the burden of a man who refuses to evolve. Being in such a relationship is like rowing a boat alone while he hasn't even stepped on board. Accepting this phrase without question dooms you to a future of repeated excuses, broken promises, and a dynamic where you're doing all the emotional labor. Remember, the Stoics also believed that our environment shapes our development. If the person you share your life with isn't helping you grow, then he's holding you back. So the next time you hear this phrase, don't be fooled by its apparent depth. Ask yourself, is he truly willing to look within, or is this just a sophisticated excuse to avoid change? Because if his words conceal a constant resistance to growth, a denial of responsibility, and a defensive stance towards self-improvement, you're looking at a pattern that will only intensify over time. And this is where it gets serious. Accepting this phrase is just the beginning. What follows are other subtle, yet destructive forms of behavior. You will gradually find yourself trapped in a dynamic where you are the one adjusting, sacrificing, and making space while he stays exactly the same. Protecting your peace is not selfish, it is self-respect. You are not here to save anyone. You are here to share your life with someone who also wants to grow, someone who acknowledges his flaws and has the courage to work on them, just as you do every day. A man who refuses to change doesn't just stunt his own growth, he holds back yours as well. Stay true to your values and act with integrity, even when your emotions beg you to stay. Because what comes next is even more delicate. Second, all my exes were crazy, toxic. When a man says this, it may at first seem like he's just opening up about his past relationships, but don't be fooled. Behind these words lies a much darker pattern, a clear sign of victim mentality, emotional immaturity, and projection. According to Stoic philosophy, true personal growth begins with honest self-examination. Epictetus made it clear, we are disturbed not by events, but by our interpretation of them. So, if a man always blames his exes for everything that went wrong and never reflects on his own role in the conflicts, it's likely he's avoiding the mirror. This is where depth psychology comes into play. Carl Jung taught that what we fail to make conscious eventually controls us from the shadows. And, often, men who speak poorly of all their exes are actually projecting their own unresolved issues. This phrase reveals a dangerous mindset, the mindset of a chronic victim. People who repeat this narrative rarely take responsibility for their actions. Instead, they shift blame, dramatize the past, and unconsciously expect you to be the one who finally won't let them down. But be careful. No one escapes their shadow unless they're willing to face it. The real question here is it truly possible that all of his exes were toxic? Or is there a pattern he simply refuses to acknowledge? A conscious woman who knows her worth and has learned not to betray herself must take this question seriously. Jung said, "What we deny submits us." And being with someone who won't take emotional responsibility is like building a house on sand. No matter how hard you try to create a healthy relationship, he will keep reenacting the same unconscious script. And the worst part? Sooner or later, the story he tells about his exes will become the story he tells about you, because someone who needs to play the victim will always find a new person to blame. Being in a relationship like this is like rowing a boat full of holes. No matter how much love you pour in, it will always be sinking. This is where emotional discipline is essential. Look beyond the words. Ask yourself, has he ever spoken about what he did wrong in past relationships? Or is his story always about what was done to him? If he's never taken responsibility before, why would he start now? Remember, your role is not to be someone's therapist. You are not here to patch up broken men who don't want to heal. You are here to walk your path with someone who walks beside you, not someone who pulls you into his. And speaking of emotional manipulation, there is one phrase you need to recognize from the very beginning, because although it may sound like a declaration of love, it is actually a very dangerous emotional trap. Third, if you really loved me, you would do what I ask. This is one of the most subtle and destructive forms of emotional blackmail. At first glance, it may seem like a sincere request away to express needs. But if you look closer, behind it hides manipulative pressure that uses your love to gain control. The Stoics believed that true love cannot be forced, it must be chosen. It should be built on freedom, mutual admiration, and respect, not on guilt or coercion. Epictetus said, "No one can enslave you emotionally unless you allow it." And this phrase is designed precisely to turn attachment into a tool of control. Carl Jung also spoke about this dynamic from the perspective of power. In his studies of the shadow, he pointed out how unbalanced relationships often begin when one person projects their insecurity and need for control under the mask of love. Phrases like this are a vivid example. When a man says this to you, he draws an invisible line that sets conditions for your attachment. Essentially, he is saying, "You are only worthy of my love if you do what I want." This is not love. It is disguised emotional manipulation. An emotionally mature woman must have the clarity to distinguish a healthy request from a masked demand, because giving in to such a phrase may seem like an act of love in the moment. But over time, you begin to lose parts of yourself, your authenticity, your boundaries, your personal power. And the most dangerous part is that the more you give in, the greater the demands become. At first, it's just a test of love. Then it becomes a routine of emotional submission. Eventually, you're no longer sure if you're acting out of love or out of fear of losing him. Phrases like these don't build relationships, they slowly destroy them. So if you ever find yourself in a conversation where someone makes you feel guilty for setting boundaries, for protecting your time, your voice, or your way of thinking, stop. You're dealing with someone who confuses love with possession. You are not here to please someone at your own expense. You are here to build a relationship where you can grow, express yourself, and be yourself unconditionally. When a man says, "If you really loved me, you would do what I ask," he is not just questioning your feelings, he is attacking your character. This phrase does not seek understanding or connection, it seeks control. It is a disguised attempt to suppress your will through guilt, erasing your personal boundaries to impose his own. Carl Jung said that true love is neither possessive nor manipulative. It is a conscious act of shared freedom. Stoic philosophy supports this, teaching us that healthy love is based not on submission, but on mutual respect. If love becomes a tool of blackmail, then it is no longer love, it is power disguised as tenderness. Giving in to such emotional blackmail not only undermines your self-discipline, but also leaves deep wounds in your self-esteem. A woman who has worked on herself, knows her worth, and values her inner truth should never betray what she believes is right just to avoid conflict. Because every time you give in against your will, you move further away from who you truly are. And the most dangerous part is this: if you allow it once, the tactic will repeat. At first, it's a small request, then a bigger demand. And one day, without even realizing it, you're living according to someone else's desires instead of being the heroine of your own life. The answer, as any Stoic or follower of Jung would say, is simple but powerful. Stand your ground firmly. Act according to your principles, not the fleeting wishes of someone who doesn't respect your boundaries, because someone who truly loves you doesn't need to make you feel guilty to keep you under control. He listens to you, understands you, and even in disagreement, respects you. It's far better to face an uncomfortable but honest conversation than to live day after day with the feeling that you have lost your emotional freedom. You don't need to offer endless explanations or justify your decisions in the face of guilt disguised as love. Because a wise woman understands that not every battle is worth fighting, and those aimed at breaking your will aren't even worth starting. And speaking of emotional manipulation, there is a phrase even more destructive, subtle, yet cruel. Fourth, "You are not enough for me. You are too little for me." Hearing these words from someone who claims to love you can be devastating. This phrase doesn't just hurt, it tries to destroy your self-esteem at its core. It's not merely criticism, it's a direct attack on your identity, your worth, your very essence. Carl Jung explained that many people project their inner dissatisfaction onto others. And this phrase is pure projection. When a man tells you that you are not enough, he is not really talking about you. He is talking about his own emptiness, his distorted expectations, and his constant need for control. He tries to make you feel small, so that you become dependent on his approval. Stoic philosophy reminds us that our true value does not depend on the judgments of others, but on our virtue, our actions, and our inner harmony. Marcus Aurelius said clearly, "Do not let the soul of another rule over yours." And that is exactly what this phrase tries to do, to rule over you through your insecurities. Someone who compares, belittles, or hints that you are not enough is really trying to make you work harder, not out of love, but to earn their approval. And in this game, you will always lose because the bar keeps shifting. Today, you're not enough, for one reason, tomorrow, for another. And in the end, you are left exhausted, doubting things you once knew with certainty. A conscious woman does not beg for affection and does not feel the need to prove her worth to anyone. You are not here to fit someone's ever-changing expectations. You are here to share your life with someone who values you as you are and inspires growth, not self-doubt. So, if you ever hear this phrase, stop, take a breath, and remember who you are. Don't fall into the trap of believing you need to be more for someone who cannot recognize all that you already are. That insecurity is not yours, it's theirs. As Jung once said, you cannot make someone see your light if they are only looking for their shadows. And as any Stoic would say, your peace is worth more than any attempt to fit into someone else's mold. External approval is fleeting, unstable, and often serves selfish purposes. True confidence is born when a woman learns to approve of herself, trust her intuition, and live according to her own values. There is no greater mistake than allowing some, especially a man, who uses your insecurities against you to define your worth. When a man says you're not enough for him, he is being dishonest with you. He is projecting his own emptiness, inflated ego, and need for control. This phrase isn't seeking truth. It aims to subjugate your mind and self-esteem to constant judgment. Spoiler alert, that judgment will always be unfair. Carl Jung explained that what we do not become conscious of becomes our destiny. And if you don't recognize such comments early on, you may find yourself trapped in a relationship where you constantly try to prove your worth, and in that struggle, you forget who you really are. The Stoics also taught us that no external opinion has power over you unless you give it permission. Marcus Aurelius expressed this powerfully. Do not let the soul of another rule over yours. If a man insists on making you feel inadequate, the wisest choice is not to stay and try to prove him wrong, but to leave with dignity and without hesitation, not out of pride, but out of self-respect. Emotional discipline means not allowing empty words to destroy what you have worked so hard to build. Your confidence, your clarity, your freedom. As Seneca said, the greatest strength is self-control. And this mastery begins the moment you decide not to accept emotional crumbs disguised as constructive feedback. If you hear this phrase, take a deep breath, stand tall, and remember, the real problem is not you, but his need to feel superior at the expense of your self-esteem. Walk away knowing that your worth is not measured by anyone's standards, especially not by the standards of someone who cannot see your greatness. And now we come to the last phrase, perhaps the most dangerous of all. Fifth, do whatever you want, said in a passive-aggressive tone. If a man says this with irony, coldness, or resentment, he is not actually giving you freedom. What he's doing is setting an emotional trap, trying to make you feel guilty for making your own decisions. He's not relinquishing control. He's masking manipulation as permission. Carl Jung spoke about the hidden ways people manipulate from their shadow. This phrase is a perfect example. He doesn't say what he truly feels. He doesn't express what he thinks, but expects you to guess. And if you don't, guilt, drama, or reproaches follow. Stoic philosophy teaches that healthy relationships are built on clear and direct communication. Seneca summed it up perfectly. Speak so that your words do not require interpretation. When someone speaks to you in riddles and double meanings, they are not communicating. They are emotionally manipulating. Such phrases keep you in a constant state of uncertainty. You find yourself trying to interpret, please, avoid negative reaction, till you realize you are living according to his emotions, not your own. Gradually, your peace of mind begins to crumble. A woman who has developed emotional intelligence should never play this game. The best response to a phrase like, do whatever you want, is to take it literally. So do it without fear, without unnecessary explanations, and without getting caught in his emotional web. This single act breaks the cycle of manipulation and forces the other person either to grow up and be straightforward or to sit alone in their passive-aggressive silence because you are no longer available for emotional games. Carl Jung and historians agree that living with clarity and authenticity is the path to true freedom. And this freedom begins the moment you stop reacting and start choosing your words, your boundaries, and who deserves your energy. Responding with clarity, or walking away from a conversation filled with ambiguity, is not coldness, it is emotional intelligence. It is a way to break the manipulative cycle and draw a clear line that says you will not let anyone play with your emotions. The Stoic attitude towards such situations is simple and strong. Don't try to decode what someone lacks the courage to say directly. Ambiguity is a tool of control, and a conscious woman, just like a historically wise man will, always choose clarity, consistency, and inner freedom. Stay true to your decisions, act with firmness, and never forget, a man who truly wants to be with you doesn't need to manipulate you, speak in riddles, or cause emotional confusion. Healthy love doesn't hide behind games. It reveals itself with transparency. Inner peace is built when your thoughts, your words, and your actions are in harmony. And as we have seen throughout this video, those phrases that may seem harmless at first often serve as very clear warning signs that, if not recognized in time, can lead you into relationships that drain your energy, your focus, and your very essence. Stoic philosophy and Carl Jung's depth psychology invite us to look beyond words, to see patterns rather than just moments, so we can wisely protect our emotional stability. Because this is not about judging others,